like,
hey, says we're
okay,
live.
we're live. Okay, so welcome to Creekwood United Methodist Church Online Bible Study. Tonight we are sans David, so there are no rules. And when the boss is away, the associates will play.
That's right. Associate Pastor Power. Woo!
Yes, this is Associate Pastor Night tonight. But yeah, David and Lindsay are celebrating 14 years of marriage. And so obviously they did not want to spend it with David on Bible study. As much as we love all of you watching. Yeah.
I also read somewhere that it's the elephant anniversary. So I'm really curious to see what presents they got each other.
Honestly, yeah. And if you know the listeners, you know that they totally would have like done something hilarious with that theme, whatever it may be. But if you're tuning in, go ahead and let us know in the comments that you're here. The way that we stream on this platform, we can't totally see who's watching all the time. So we love to hear from you. And let's see, what is something you're enjoying now that the weather's a little bit cooler? So I have loved sitting outside. I kind of redid my patio area back when it was really hot and everything was on sale. So I've been doing a lot of answering emails from the patio instead of the couch when the weather's nice.
Nice. You changed your office locale is what I'm hearing.
Always. It's only about 10 feet. It's a very small apartment, but it's fine.
I mean, but you set up another home office. I hear deductible expenses right there.
Yeah.
So something that I've been enjoying since the weather turned cooler is rolling with my windows down. I love driving with the windows down. I keep lots of hair ties like everywhere because then it's not a Medusa situation when I get done. But yeah, driving with the windows down, it just makes me feel like I recapture my high school glory days. Like I feel right.
Like
the tunes are up, windows down. This mom is rolling.
I love it. Do the boys do okay with the windows down, or is that just when you're riding solo?
Okay, it's most fun when I'm alone, of course. Like a Target run, it's most fun alone. But when they're there, so I got them, our church did a promo a while back where there were tiny sunglasses to be had. And so I have a bag of tiny sunglasses because inevitably they get broken or lost. So sunglasses help because the wind is then not too much for their little faces.
Bless them. Well, Jessica, why don't I introduce you so people know, like, where's David? Did he get fired?
No, David's fine.
Terrible way to announce. David is fine. It's just their anniversary and he's taking the night off. But this is Jessica Wright, and she is an associate pastor at First Allen. And we have gotten to connect with Jessica a couple times over the last year. And Jessica is the one, I'll just say, when David's out of town and something's going wrong, like a pandemic is happening, I usually message Jessica and I'm like, hey, should I bother David? So Jessica is kind of my associate pastor lifeline. And Jessica, do you tell them about your family, a little bit more about your journey in ministry or what you do at Allen?
Sure. Because, preachers, we can just talk and talk. Like if
That's
you pass by the word,
yeah.
we'd be fine. Like NASCAR commentators, like we can do this. So I have a husband named Andy and two boys at home. James, who's in 4th grade, and Ethan, who's in kindergarten, and a geriatric cat named Haley, whom we've had for 17 years. And
wow.
Yeah. She just kept getting demoted. Like she came in and she was the fur baby and she was, the princess. And we went for walks with a leash and a harness. Like I was that cat mom. Yes. And then I had human babies, and she just kept getting demoted. But she has done a great job teaching my boys gentle touches because she's a good girl. Let's see. At First Allen, I oversee our program staff. So children, youth, adult, senior adult ministries kind of are under my umbrella. And then I head up all of our mission and outreach and advocacy efforts. I preach like every 4 to 6 weeks. And I lead a study that happens after our live stream worship service called Going Deeper Together every Sunday at noon. I've led some really fun studies this spring and last fall. One of them called I Think You're Wrong, But I'm Listening, a guide to grace-filled political conversations, which was my favorite because I think we should talk politics and we just need to figure out how to do that and be nice to each other.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Wow.
Right. It's the season.
Yeah.
And then let's see, I was a candidate for ministry out of First United Methodist Church Denton, and was commissioned in 2009 and ordained in 2011. And even though I was a candidate from First Denton, that was my first appointment.
Oh, wow.
I know you hardly ever go back where you came from.
Yeah.
Right, Naomi, Ruth, anybody?
Yeah, that's going to fit in so well.
I
Wow.
know, preview. But I got to go back where I came from and serve with youth there and be the youth pastor for a while. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, here's that thing. I didn't grow up Christian. That's interesting to know, maybe. I was brought to Jesus through a campus ministry and a hamburger and some really persistent friends. I still feel like I read some of these stories as an outsider. And my mom is Jewish. And so sometimes when I read these, I'm like, so how did Jewish folks interpret these? Because I'm really interested in that. I think sometimes Christians, we read it so hard through the lens of Jesus that we miss some of the original stuff.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so great. Thank you for sharing all of that. So I see we've got a couple of folks watching. No one's commented yet, so be sure and chime in. We were talking earlier about our newest favorite activity now that the weather's cooler. So Jessica likes driving with the windows down. I really like sitting outside on my patio. Although today I did go get my first pumpkin spice latte of the season. I waited this long.
Did it have to be officially fall for you?
I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was just the cooler weather. Like I had to feel it, but I bought pumpkin flavored grounds for the house weeks ago, but this was the first trip to Starbucks because so my dog's name is Rosie, like Rosie the Riveter. And so Rosie got her first puppuccino today. It was a very big day in my house.
What's in a puppuccino? Does it have caffeine?
Cream. No.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
You don't need to caffeinate the animals. They're enough as they are.
Not my sweet Rosie. So yeah, she went cuckoo bananas for her puppuccino. She thought I was the coolest thing ever when I did that. So really just racking up the mom points here.
Of course. So I have a confession that I'm not a big fan of seasonal pies, and so pumpkin flavor is not my favorite. One time in seminary, they had a Thanksgiving themed lunch at Perkins. That was a thing that they did. And there was pumpkin pie and there was pecan pie, and I liked neither pie. So I just made myself a big old bowl of whipped cream and came back to the table, and people were like, where's your pie under that? I was like, I don't like the pies. I'm just having, so basically I had a puppuccino. Cool.
You had a puppuccino.
That's awesome. I'm going to say that from now on.
Now, have you heard this year, this is what I learned today in the office, there is a pumpkin shortage, like canned pumpkin. There is a shortage this year. We won't, I heard somebody had to go to 5 different stores to make a pumpkin pie the other day just to get canned pumpkin.
Oh man.
So the pumpkin spice lattes are fine, but the canned pumpkin is not.
Well, do you think there's real pumpkin in the pumpkin spice? I mean, I don't think real pumpkin affects that. Yeah.
No, because that's what I was like. So what does that ruin? What's gone? It's just the pie. But I like pumpkin pie. But I like all pies, so it's fine.
I'll eat a lot of other pies.
Oh man, I'm a pie gal. I need some pie is my constant, instead of all shucks, I just say, I need some pie. So it's been a really big motto in 2020.
Right.
I need some pie. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, we are going to get rolling. I see a couple people watching. My Nana is watching, so that's super exciting. Nana, we're about to go off about women tonight, so hang on. So
we're my clergy women shirt. You can't really see.
Yes, look at you. Oh my gosh, I need one. The clergy women, you all have to hear this. They found a way to leave a note and a rose on all of the seats of the women that were getting commissioned and ordained on Friday night. And that, I walk in and we're having this big emotional moment, and you just see some people, and I saw David, and I saw my friend Scott Gilliland and Blair, and I just I'm already having this, it's happening. And I look, and this note is there, and it was from the clergy women, and it was we're watching and we're going to stand with you. And I was like, oh my God, it was just boo-hooing. So I have the card, it's sitting on my mantle right now, actually. So
that's awesome.
Big props to the clergy women for making that happen and for finding the way to support us. Even though we couldn't do it in the normal way. It was just really, really a very touching thing. So
that's awesome.
Super appreciative of that. So I need to get a shirt next round.
Yes, we ordered these a while ago, and at one point I was the one who had the box of shirts in my trunk and just kept schlepping them around to different places and selling them. Like I felt like a starving artist with my own album in the back. Like, anybody want my album? $5.
Yeah.
And then at some point I took off that hat and handed the box of shirts over to someone else, and I don't know where they've gone. We probably need to reorder some, but
yeah, I know plenty from our class will want them. So speaking of awesome women, we're going to be talking about the book of Ruth from now. So Jessica, we started this the week that shutdown started. And we have so far, I know we've done Philippians, Micah, and the Gospel of Mark, doing one chapter a week. And so we've kind of flipped Old Testament, New Testament. And I like the Old Testament a lot better than the New Testament. You need Jesus, but I love the Old Testament. So David always lets me pick the Old Testament books. And so he was like, well, what do you want to do for Old Testament? And I was like, let's do Ruth. Like, let's really challenge ourselves. Like, we've done a prophet. You know, I really wanted to do like Exodus, but we would be doing that for years.
Yeah, you'd be leaving for a while.
Yeah. So we thought Ruth was a great story because I think Ruth, we think we know what happens in Ruth. And then you actually read Ruth and you're like, wait, what? There's so many great questions for Ruth. And just so everybody knows, we're going to be using some notes from a study that our friend Danielle Kim wrote. So Danielle was a guest during the Gospel of Mark, and she's an associate pastor at Custer Road. So we've got like North Central District associate pastor inception happening tonight. But Danielle wrote a really great study over the book of Ruth from the perspective of an immigrant. So we're kind of using some of Danielle's work. Obviously, we've got study Bibles and commentaries and all of the smart, as Kelly Carpenter coined last week, smart Bible people that we read, that we're going to talk about. So we're going to just kind of do some introduction pieces for the book of Ruth, and then we'll cover chapter 1. So to kind of jump us back in, so Philippians was a letter in the New Testament, Micah was a prophet in the Old Testament, and Mark was a gospel. So when we get to Ruth, it's really interesting because what I read kind of argued about what to call Ruth. Is it a book of history? Is it kind of like Jonah, where it's like prophetic-ish? But the word that I kind of love what it settled on was it's an expanded parable.
Yes.
Yeah, it's
I
not
found that
necessarily.
too.
Yeah, so brilliant, right? So it's like not necessarily a historical report because there's not a lot of like pointed references to a time and place. It's missing a lot of like political ideas and narrative ideas. Like, if you were to write a journal about what was happening in 2020, you wouldn't tell me about the time you took your dog for a walk. That's what's happening here. Like, you can't point when this was. And so dating the book of Ruth is actually really difficult for Bible scholars. But what's so cool and what we're going to kind of get into, it has this wildly sophisticated literary style that the English language really ruins for us. Like, there's so many puns. Hi, Rosie is coming over to say hello, I guess. There's so many puns and so many plays on words and so many like things that in the Hebrew, like you would laugh at, or you would know what's going to happen in the story, that in English, you just read it and you're like, why does that matter? So we'll kind of go over some of that. But the story of Ruth, is the only other book that is named after a woman and predominantly features a woman as the main character is the book of Esther. And the book of Esther is the only book in the Bible that never says the word God, never mentions God.
Correct.
But with Ruth, I think we see a similar theme of God's love coming to people through other people, right? Neither Naomi nor Ruth have a conversation with God in the book. All of the stuff that they know and they learn about God happen in relationship and with one another. So we're going to kind of see and I think we're going to explore how do we perceive and how do we understand God's love through other people, but also how is the way that we treat other people, how they understand God's love, which will get fun and rough all at once. For my Bible history nerds, Ruth should kind of send up a little ping in your brain. Because she is in the genealogy of David, not David Lesnar, King David. Maybe David Lesnar, I don't know, somewhere in there. But Ruth is David's great grandmother. And we know that the Davidic line then ends up going to Jesus. And so Ruth is kind of part of this messianic lineage or line of people that end up becoming Jesus at the end. The
And
only
a
other thing
Moabite at that. Ooh, gross.
right. Yeah. And we're going to talk all about Moab and like, ooh, it is not ideal. The only other thing that I was thinking when I wrote was, or when I read today was one of the commentaries said that when we look at Ruth, it is best not to look at it like a microscope, getting caught up in the details of what's being said and what's happening and how does this fit in history is not how you read Ruth, but it's like a kaleidoscope. And so when you were a kid, you remember looking at kaleidoscope. And I remember, like, for me, and maybe I'm just easily entertained, but every time I would look at it, I would see something different. There's kind of different things to focus on when you look at a kaleidoscope, and you can, when you look at the big picture of a kaleidoscope, it's beautiful. And so that's kind of what I want to encourage us as we approach Ruth. And again, like, taking these folks through all these different genre of biblical literature is really tough. Because like we had to like sit there with Micah and we were like, prophets don't tell the future. And then we did a gospel and it was easy, but it was Mark. So things were weird. Like Jesus was spitting and digging in the dirt and stuff. So
yes. And Mark doesn't waste any time. He's like, snap, snap. We got things to do.
Jesus isn't born in Mark. He just shows up one day.
Ain't got time to tell you the whole story. Here's what's important.
Yes, like the resurrection. Are you kidding me? He's like, they ran away afraid. What?
The end.
So yeah. And so Ruth is kind of a turn back to, it's just going to feel different. So if everybody at home, just again, with these stories and even those of us who've gone to seminary and passed the board interviews, we think we know, and then we read and we're reminded to take it in as if we're taking it in for the first time. And so I really want to encourage everybody, pop open a Bible, pull it up on your phone. Let's read this together tonight. And really, really pay attention, especially as we're going into a text that's maybe not as familiar to some of us as the Gospels were. Let's be present and do this all together. So I'm going to pray before we start chapter 1, if that's okay. Actually, no. Jessica, I want you to pray. But okay. We've done this a couple times. And I just want to offer up just a few seconds of silence. I think no matter where we fall in the political spectrum, we can recognize that Ruth Bader Ginsburg worked really hard for this country. Whether we agree with what she did or not, her loss is still one that is bringing up a lot of tension and bringing up, there's been no space to grieve Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I think we've forgotten to do that. And even the Jewish community a lot of them didn't learn about her death until Sunday because it was a holy weekend. And the Jewish community grieves for a week when someone passes. So I just want to take a minute to let's just take a moment of silence. And again, even if you didn't agree with her and agree with the choices she made, I think we can at least pray for her family and for their grieving process and the Jewish community as well. Because I just want us to stop and take a moment in this process. So Jessica, if you'll give us about 20 seconds of silence, and then if you'll pray, and then we'll get started with chapter 1.
Holy are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who makes us holy. Blessed are you. You call us to study your word, to know the way and the truth and the light that is offered through the words of Scripture. We pray that your presence is felt by those who come to study tonight and all those who may encounter this in the days and weeks and months to come, that in the conversation and in the silence and in our words and through your word, we might hear you speak, we might know your will, we might be your people in this time and in this place. God, this story opens with the loss of loved ones. And so we are mindful of those who have lost loved ones. And we lift up especially your beloved daughter, Ruth. May her memory be a blessing. We offer all these prayers in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Awesome. Thank you for that, Jessica. So we're going to take chapter 1. There is, again, Ruth is a short book, but I think so much happens, like you said, in this first chapter. So we're just going to kind of go slow. And for those of you at home, even when we go slow, it ends up fine. And we end up finding so much stuff in here. So we are going to start with verses 1 through 5. So again, I'm reading from the NRSV in my house, but if you are reading a different version and something is phrased interestingly at home, or so you've got notes in your study Bible at home, feel free to comment in there. Kathy Bradford and Steve Batchelor are always so good at bringing us what's in their materials as well. So we'd love for you all just to engage with that. Again, as we kind of encounter just this really, we picked Ruth weeks ago, not knowing how much it was all going to fit with the next couple of weeks, which just seems to be how it always works with this Bible study. Like we picked Philippians and just thought, oh yeah, and it was about community, and Micah was about seeking justice, and that felt at such an interesting time. And then, Mark kept on being timely with insiders and outsiders, and so Ruth is going to be just another great word that the Holy Spirit has for us. So this is verses 1 through 5 of Ruth chapter 1. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem in Judah went to live in the country of Moab, he and his wife and 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife was Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion, and they were Epaphrodites. This is where they didn't teach us how to say any of this in seminary. From Bethlehem in Judah. They went into the country of Moab and remained there. But Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. These took Moabite wives. The name of the one Orpah, and the name of the other was Ruth. When they had lived there for about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion had died, so that the woman was left without her 2 sons and her husbands. So just a couple of notes on this before we get to our questions. Again, Ruth is wonderfully poetic. So when it says they left Bethlehem to go to Moab, to us, we're like, oh, okay, they went from one place to another. To an ancient Israel audience, what they're hearing is they left the house of bread, which is what Bethlehem translates to be, to Moab, which nothing good ever happens when Moab or Moabites are involved in scripture. In Genesis 19, there's this wild contempt for Moabites in Numbers, in the law. There's this hostile run-in with the Moabites. It just never goes well when Moabites are involved. So when the reader hears there's a famine in Bethlehem, the house of bread has no bread, wildly ironic. So these people are going to Moab, danger, 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 because that's where they're going to find what they need. And it's just so this fascinating twist of poetry that happens here. For an ancient Israeli audience, I don't even know if we have a comparison. It would be saying there was a famine in Dallas, so somebody went out to Odessa. And I'm from Odessa, so I can say it.
I was going to say.
They went to Odessa for refuge. Right? Oh gosh. Wow. That's the choice that's being made here. And not Midland, Odessa. Because Midland would be fine. I'm from there. I can say this. This is no one can pick on my little brother except for me. I can say this about Odessa. So that's what's happening here. Also, what's happening in this literary structure is the way that the language works. So in the first couple of verses, you have the man and his wife and his 2 sons. This is the man's name. This is his wife's name. These are the sons' names. Then Elimelech, or whatever his name is, dies, and the narrative switch, and Naomi's the main character. That's a big ding-dang deal in a wildly patriarchal society. One, that Naomi's even named, and 2, that within the first 5 verses, she becomes the main character, because essentially in the rest of scripture, when the patriarch dies, the firstborn son becomes the main character because that's usually the heir.
Right. And he would have been responsible for taking care of his mama.
Right,
like,
exactly.
She would have been a burden to him, basically, and to his wife. And they would have taken care of her. Children were your retirement policy. So,
yeah, you think you have problems with your in-laws, folks. Let me tell you, biblical patriarchy was not ideal. And even more interesting, back to names, sorry, the names of the sons. Mahalon means disease, and Chilion means to perish. So, like, even the kids' names are just like, listen, they're not going to make it. Like, this is how it starts. This is not your main character. These are not the droids you're looking for. Like, the author offers no wiggle room as to, and so it's like if you hear a fairy tale, like once upon a time, but then, and so it feels normal, and then like something that doesn't fit in the genre of fairy tale would be thrown in here. Like the assumptions of literary structure are totally broken with this shift to Naomi being the main character. So I think that's all I have on note. So anything to add before I go to our questions?
Did you talk about what Naomi's name meant?
No.
Because we introduce all our characters here and we're introducing them by name, and names are important when they're given. So Naomi means sweet or pleasant. So in contrast to disease and dying, her children, you've got sweet and pleasant Naomi.
Right. Which also, like, what a terrible thing to name your kids. But, like, I get it. But also, this isn't totally, like, historically accurate. But, like, Sweet and Pleasant had 2 kids named Disease and Death. Neat.
Right.
Sounds terrible.
Yes. Yeah. I know.
You think your name is bad and hard to spell. Sorry, folks.
Well, this is part of that parable thing, right? Like, these names are being used as the clues, as you said. So hopefully no one in ancient Israel actually named their kid Disease and Death, but you know.
Okay, so 2 questions for us before we go to the next section. So the first I had is Moabites are things that Israelites despise. Like you didn't go to a Moabite for help unless you were on fire, apparently is what we're learning here. And so in a general sense, in a personal sense, in a contextual sense, kind of whatever you want to answer this question, I just kind of had this thought, what are things that we despise until we must turn to them in a crisis? Right. Similar to what we're seeing with the Moabites.
Yeah, so I was thinking about this, and I was reflecting because as I was becoming a pastor in local church ministry, it was in the shadow of the Great Recession of 2008, 2009, right? So I am entering local church ministry, and it was heartbreaking and also fascinating to see the folks come through my door looking for assistance who never thought they would be the ones. They were always the ones who had written the checks. They were always the ones who had made the donations to the food pantry, and they couldn't imagine and were struggling with the sense of identity of who they were, because now they were the person who needed the help. And so it brought up all that feeling that they probably weren't aware. It was probably subconscious that they had these assumptions about people who need help that they didn't want to identify with. And, despise may be too far there, but it was not something that was for them. It was for others. And now here they were needing that kind of assistance. So that's what came to mind for me was folks who, because I think as Americans, we're really brought up to pride ourselves on being able to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and be ruggedly independent and work hard and improve ourselves. And sometimes you can do all the right things and stuff just doesn't work and things just happen. So the government assistance, those going to a helping agency, going to a church, having to admit that you need help is so hard for us in our context, I think.
Yeah, I think along the same lines, I remember, and that makes me sound 1,000 years old, but I feel like a few years ago, there was a lot of jokes around therapy, like, oh, she's crazy, she goes to therapy, or like, oh, you need some therapy, or like, even like, oh, I'll go to therapy about it one day, ha, ha, ha. And I and everybody knows this, I see a therapist twice a month. Like, it's literally fine. And I would never, ever crack a joke about it anymore because, and I go, obviously in response to events, but just preventatively. Like, I don't not go, I don't stop going. And so that's been a really interesting piece for me in the last couple of years is, this thing, and maybe not despise, but this thing that we made fun of that we end up needing, and how we benefit so greatly from it, and almost the way that we're ashamed, I think, maybe of how we made fun of things earlier.
Right.
So that's a great example. And I think too, we see a lot of people, it's always interesting who shows up in the most dire moments. And sometimes it is the people that we didn't think twice about, right? And maybe not despise, but I don't know, when something goes really, really, really wrong, there's always that friend that shows up and you're like, I'm actually kind of surprised that you're showing up in this moment.
I did not expect this of you.
Right. And in a way that, whether it's a question of them or a question of your relationship, isn't it interesting that the only place they have to go is Moab? Right. I've thought a lot about that. And I think I've experienced that in the pandemic with so many people who, I'll never get Facebook. I just can't do Facebook. And then Facebook became the only way. I mean, for Creekwood, we're only streaming to Facebook. We're not streaming to any other platform. And so I've been really proud of how many people have figured out how to use Facebook, because to them, it's how they worship now.
Right.
And it doesn't make Facebook still not the worst place sometimes, but
yeah, well, I mean, it's a tool like anything, right? I mean, you just got to know what your tool is capable of. I mean, I feel the same way about social media and Facebook as I probably feel about humans learning how to split atoms, right? Like, you can do great things with it and you can do terrible things with it. And it's just a matter of how you use the thing that you've learned. But I think I wonder, it sets up that this family must have been in such dire need and didn't have family to turn to, or the family had already left and gone somewhere, that this is where they end up going. They went to the last place you would expect them to go to look for help. And then to marry into it. Whoa.
So that's a whole other thing that happens. Is it not just do they go to Moab, but they marry two Moabite women, their only sons.
Right.
They allow to marry Moabite women.
Could you not find a nice Jewish girl? I mean, come on. Were there not any others?
Like, oh my gosh, you remember in high school, like the guy that would date the freshman? You're like, why won't people your age date you? That's what I just heard. Like, why won't Jewish people date you?
Well, I mean, they were named Diseased and Dying, so people who spoke Hebrew were like, nah, pass, hard pass.
They had to get a Moabite that wouldn't understand. Oh, tragic. Oh, Lord. So here's another question, I think maybe along those lines. So I think there are things that we, and particularly in 2020, I think we all, so I saw a really funny tweet the other day, and it said, because it was talking about how there's going to be a Tiger King movie, and everyone's over Tiger King, right? Like, it was all the rage for 2 weeks, and it said, can people please just understand that we only liked Tiger King because we all thought we were only staying home for 2 weeks. And I thought that was so interesting, because this pandemic has lasted, I think, a lot longer than we all thought, right? Like, on all ends of the political spectrum, right? Like, I think we all kind of thought by Easter we'd be back, or by the summer we'd be back. And now I think is the first time we don't have like a day where we're all like, oh, by then it'll be gone. We're like, it's going to be years, like, or whatever, or months, or kind of whatever. So I think we're having to re-examine some of our habits that we've had, because when something was just 2 weeks long, we could watch TV all day long and eat really terrible. And again, as your friendly neighborhood pastor who drinks, and I'd see some of y'all's comments on Facebook, we thought it was funny to crack open a bottle of wine at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday. But now that it's been 6 months, I'm a little concerned with myself and with other people about some of the stuff we've sought out in times of crisis that have made us unfruitful. Things like how much time we're spending on Facebook, things like I've had to really examine what I've been eating. Because I was hitting the double stuffed Oreos hard. And then I had to wear pants again, and it was like, uh-oh. Because I could do it for 2 weeks, but I can't do that for 6 months. And so, so the real question that I wrote is, what do we seek out in desperate times that have made our lives unfruitful? But I mean that in a very contextual 2020 sense of, what have we seen that we need to look at going into this new season?
Okay, that makes it fruitful or unfruitful?
Unfruitful. Did I say that wrong?
That's all right. I just want to make sure, because I want to.
Yeah,
I started naming some stuff, and you're like, but wait, that's the opposite.
You're like, reading the Bible's very unfruitful. What?
What? You don't recommend reading the Bible, Pastor? Oh dear, someone's gonna call the bishop. So unfruitful. Well, okay. So I think you named a lot of the things that. Okay, so when my kids were on spring break, and that was kind of when we shut it down, right? That Sunday at the end of spring break was when we didn't have people in the building. I went in and preached, and we streamed it kind of, because we had to learn a whole lot of stuff. That one was rough. Ooh, go back and watch that one and be like, ooh.
Yeah.
But and then they said, well, we'll just we were in Plano ISD at that point, and so they're like, we're going to extend spring break. And I was like, okay, great, another week of vacation. We can have family fun time. And I think the coping strategies that we have for short term that can be fun and frivolous and not fruitful cannot become habits, right? Yeah. If they become habits, I think is when it becomes really problematic. If I was hearing mine and all the other neighbors' garbage go clink, clink, clink. And I was like, ooh, that's a problem. How much are we all drinking? We need to, that is not the healthiest coping mechanism. I know that a lot of people, because of their own discernment around their health and their risk tolerance, have really they are battening down the hatches. And that's perfect. That can be fruitful and the right choice. But at the same time, how do you stay connected? How do you stay connected with loved ones? How do you stay connected with your community, your faith community? I think if you shut it down and isolate, that can be really unfruitful, right? Because we read back in Genesis, right? The human was not made to live alone, needed a person. So the isolation can be really difficult. I know a lot of people started, they would get together with friends at a different time, like they'd do a Zoom or they'd do a Google Meet or whatever. They'd use a platform to be able to see each other's faces and hear each other's voices and connect with each other. And I think that is a really awesome coping mechanism. Oh man, all the unfruitful stuff. Because I think also we had a greater turn towards social media in all of this to keep us connected. Yes. But it's also the danger of not seeing people face to face. It's like, I see people, I'm going to act like I'm more redeemed right now. I see people do things in cars toward one another that they would probably never do if they were walking by each other on the sidewalk. Like,
that's a great way to phrase that. Yep.
Right. Like, I don't know who has the chutzpah to be like flipping people off and using profanity when you're within touching distance of each other versus being in your car. So the social media functions the same way, it feels like. I'm removed from you physically, and so I have all of this feeling of anonymity, and I say these really venomous things, and it makes me feel better, and I hang out in these virtual spaces with people who think like me and support the same things I do, and it's kind of an echo chamber, but it makes me feel connected to a community, even if it's not the healthiest community. And I feel like that's dangerous too, because we can just end up feeding each other's unhealthy views of self and others and world. Ooh, like it can get real nasty out there.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I said in the pastoral prayer on Sunday this past week that just kind of came in the moment, thank you, Holy Spirit, was I was thinking a little about the spots in 2020. And I think like 2020 has become a meme. And like don't get me wrong, it's awful. Like from day one, it has been awful for me. However, there are positives. And I think sometimes we're not pushing each other to see the positives. And that becomes, it's like a dog chasing its tail. It's not going anywhere. Right. When we're circling in this negative. And so I think that particularly these things we're seeking out that are making our lives unfruitful is wrapped up in so much negativity, like you said, right? Well, everything sucks, so I'm going to eat unhealthy. Everything's terrible, so I'm going to drink a ton. Everything's terrible, so I'm not going to work, right?
Right.
And hear me super clearly, everyone. I'm not saying you can't have a cheeseburger every once in a while, or you can't drink, well, on Friday night or whatever. Like, I'm not saying that we all need to abstain and eat carrots and water for the rest of our pandemic. But I've had to do it myself, and I have found it very fruitful to really examine. One of the things, and I'll just be honest, one of the reasons I got Rosie, I'd wanted a dog for a long, long, long time, but I was starting to fear how much I wasn't going outside. My vitamin D levels were super low. I was starting to get a little even though I was going to work, I was still being super isolated when I came home. And so Rosie makes me get out, and I was talking with some kids in our little neighborhood before we came up here. So just some things that we can put in our lives. I really want us to help push for the positive. Pam commented, absolutely. I think we're being way more negative as the longer this has continued. The pandemic, I think we were all holding hands and singing Kumbaya and watching Tiger King the first 2 weeks. And then, we have not found the ways to really turn and spin the positive. And so I really want to push us to find what's one good thing, right? What's one good thing of today, one good thing of this week, or whatever it is. And maybe that's something people want to comment. For those of you who are watching, maybe tell us one good thing of the day, just so there's positive comments on this video when people are scrolling later, and they're going to scroll past it, and they'll just be like, why did somebody comment about a good thing here?
Well, and I found perspective is a lot, right? I'm working with my kindergartner about this because he reminds me of myself at that age. I was kind of a negative Nelly. Like, the glass was always half empty, and I had a really dark kind of outlook on life. So trying to look for things to be grateful for, right? Because even if he was talking about a friend did something and he didn't like it, and the teacher caught him instead of the friend. That's a thing that happens in kindergarten. Even if that's happening, okay, but what do we have that we can be grateful for? I think that's been really helpful to me. Methodist, we're all about moderation, right? So moderation in the cheeseburgers and the glasses of wine and things like that. I also question myself now when I'm reaching for something. Am I hungry? Am I thirsty? Am I enjoying this glass with my husband and having a nice relaxing moment? Or am I sitting alone with a TV or a computer screen? What is my motivation with this? And then I'm just becoming more and more aware of the things I used to numb out, right? I can't handle this anymore. When this first started, I was in a webinar with a doctor, and he talked about one of the greatest struggles we would likely see with this pandemic is that it's a crisis. It's a tragedy in slow motion. Unlike a hurricane or a tornado or an earthquake or, a battle that kind of happens and it has a defined time frame, and it happens and it's done. And then we recover from it. This thing just keeps rolling and morphing and touching new parts of our lives and affecting different loved ones. And it just is slow, like a really slow avalanche of stuff.
That's a great way to phrase that, because it happened today. I learned of somebody else that tested positive, and I was like, oh my, so I completely agree. We've got to move on, because we can spend till 8:30 on the first 5 verses alone.
I was figuring out how slow we can go. I was like, so 45 minutes on 5 verses. Perfect. That'll be great.
It's fine. That's how we roll around here. David will tell you not anything out of the normal. It's
perfect.
Totally fine. So let's do 6 through 14. So we get a little bit of a bigger chunk knocked out here. And we'll try to move through a little bit faster because, yeah, thank you all for your comments. Pam, you're just the sweetest. I cannot with you. Pam cracks me up. Okay, so
I'm
this
go
is
back
verse
and look
6
for
through
Pam's
4.
comments later.
Yeah, she's just saying she's watching and listening to 2 awesome female pastors, and that's her positive for the day. I know.
Love
She's
it.
so awesome. Okay, so this is verses 6 through 14. Then she, which is talking about Naomi, she started to return with her daughters-in-law to from the country of Moab. So she's leaving the bad place. For she had heard in the country of Moab that the Lord had considered his people and given them food. So she set out from the place where she had been living, she and her 2 daughters-in-law, and they went by their way to go back to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant you that you may find security, each of you in the house of your husband." Then she kissed them, and they wept aloud. They said to her, "No, we will return with you and your people." But Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Do I still have sons in my womb that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters. Go your way, for I am too old to even have a husband. Even if I thought there was hope for me, even if I should have a husband tonight and bear sons, would you wait until they were grown? Would you then refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, it has been far more bitter for me than you, because the hand of the Lord is turned against me." Then they wept aloud again. Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her.
Oh, I love that verb. Did you read about that verb?
I did. Didn't make a note. You want to tell us?
Oh, so Ruth clung to her. This is the same verb that appears back in Genesis. Hold on. I got to find it here. It's talking about when people get married. Genesis.
Oh, wow.
For this reason, a man leaves his father and mother and clings to his wife.
Yeah.
Clinging.
Wow.
Ruth clings to Naomi like a husband clings to his wife.
Wow.
That's a level of commitment.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll get to that.
Okay, sorry.
No, you're okay. No, you're good. That's so great. So, okay. So they're leaving Moab to go back to Judah because they've heard the famine is over. And we will have to talk about biblical famine another day. A story opening up with a famine happening is kind of like a story opening up with once upon a time there was a princess. Like total standard operating procedure, famine, lots of great stories centered around famine. So grief and pain cause us to do really interesting things, right? And we'll get to Naomi's response. So in a patriarchal society, particularly an extra patriarchal society, like I feel like there's different levels of patriarchal society.
You're at level 1 patriarchy.
Yeah, this is level 10 patriarchy.
Right.
We're like at level 3 in life. So in this level of patriarchal society, widows only find security in remarriage, right? You as a woman, you were property without an owner if you if your husband had died. And so Naomi's really passionate argument for her daughters-in-law is not just leave me alone, I hate everything. It was, I'm concerned for your safety. If you stay with me, what's your big bad plan here? Because so in a levirate marriage, which is what was Old Testament procedure, you marry your brother-in-law if your husband dies.
Right.
And you name the oldest son the name of your dead first husband, so that way his name carries on. And it was property control. That's exactly what it was. Like, same reason why you have a will for all your stuff when you die. Now, again, women are not property anymore. Sorry, everyone. But this is how it works. It's just property control.
Also, thanks to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, because I've been reading all the things she did to help us with that we could own property, get credit cards, it wasn't that long ago.
And it's all like, so, just fascinating, like, that I'm assuming she's named after this Ruth since she was Jewish.
Right.
So it just is like, we love it. So again, there's this really cool narrative moment. Bread returns to the house of bread. No more famine in Bethlehem. So Naomi, again, so she's not being mean to her daughters-in-law. She wants them to find rest and security. That's all that's happening here. What you read when you hear this, I think we read it, we're like, gee, like, what's wrong with Naomi? But what we're seeing is she is concerned for their safety in this society. And so Ruth clinging to her. Ruth is risking everything by not going back to her parents to be married off again. She really is risking a ton. But I want to talk about Orpah's choice for a second. So historically, Orpah is like really highly criticized in this story, because if Ruth is the hero and makes a good choice, for some reason we've made that a total binary where Orpah made a bad choice.
It's like Martha and Mary, right? Like there could be room for both things.
Jesus never condemned Martha, and no one talks about that.
Right? It's us who do it.
Mary made the better choice. Never said Martha made a bad choice.
Right.
Anyway.
Okay, so Orpah may not have made a mean choice. She just made a different choice.
And historically, she made the choice that followed the rules.
Yes.
Ish, right? She obeys and she followed the rules and customs of what was around her. And what's interesting, no one elected to tell Orpah's story. This is one of those biblical cliffhangers that we don't know what happens to Orpah after this. We don't know if I don't think we know if she remarries. We don't know if she continues on a lineage. I think there's like something later about Orpah's sons that like can maybe go back to it, but that also could be just like allegory.
I'm flipping to the end, trying to see if there was anything.
I don't recall, but it's also, I haven't read the whole thing today. So I want to talk about Orpah for a second. So I'm glad that you brought up your first appointment, because the first question I have is like, what would it be like for each of us to return to a place of origin? And I made fun of Odessa earlier, but there are things that happen. There are songs that come on the radio. There was a song the other day, like you said, driving down the road with your windows down feels like high school. There was a song that came on and I was like, high school me like loved this song, you know, like, so, and what does that do? Like, for me, that was kind of a cool, like, oh man, like moment. And so, again, as surface level or as deep as we want to answer this question, but kind of what does it mean to us to return to a place of origin? Because for Orpah, she is an immigrant in Israeli territory and she's from Moab. Like, it's very dangerous for her to stay with Naomi with no man around. So yeah, let's talk about that a little bit.
Okay, so the first thing that came to mind when I was reading this question, so my bachelor's degree is in English. So I thought of a poem by Robert Frost called Death of the Hired Man. It's very long, but part of it goes like this. They're talking about this hired man and they think he's kind of a schlub, like he's not doing as much work as they probably brought him on to do, but they're, you know, the wife is trying to, you know, have kindness toward him. And there's some resonance here with the passage that we're reading because all the loving kindness and such. But the woman, so the part of the poem goes like this. This is what came to my mind first. Part of a moon was falling down the west, dragging the whole sky with it to the hills. Its light poured softly in her lap. She saw it and spread her apron to it. She put out her hand among the harp-like morning glory strings, taut with the dew from garden bed to eaves, as if she played unheard some tenderness that wrought on him beside her in the night. Warren, she said, he has come home to die. You needn't be afraid he'll leave you this time. Home, he mocked gently. Yes, what else but home? It all depends on what you mean by home. Of course, he's nothing to us anymore. Then was the hound that came a stranger to us out of the woods, worn out upon the trail. Home is the place where, when you have to go there, they have to take you in. I should have called it something you somehow haven't to deserve. Which to me, like, speaks about our understanding of grace, right? Wow. Like, something you don't have to deserve is home.
Wow.
And, like,
that's I think, so good.
Well, I mean, sometimes other degrees come in handy in reading stuff. So it's a really cool poem. And if you want to go out, I can share a link to that later. But just this idea, because I think for some people, and because this is the same, this is a trap that we can fall into with any word, like father, like mother. If our own experiences of a word, of a position, of a concept have not been positive, then it's hard to hear it that way. But I love this offering of an understanding that home is that place that when you go there, they have to take you in and you don't have to deserve it. I thought about, I have a deep affection for lots of places in my life. So there's also a Beatles song, those great theologians, the Beatles.
Yes.
called In My Life. And the first
Yay.
couple lines, there are places I'll remember all my life, though some have changed, some forever, not for better. Some have gone and some remain. All these places had their moments. And I remember like when I was graduating from college or when I was leaving an appointment, just wandering around the campus of whatever place it was, and that song would be in my mind. And just that feeling of a kind of grief that even if I come back here, it's not going to be the same.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
for me, as a 39-year-old woman, mom, when I go to my mother's house, so many things are familiar, but not the same.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So you can come back, hopefully, to places that you would identify as a home, but they may be different. When I came back to First Denton, having been a member of that church and having been on staff as an admin at that church and then getting appointed to that church as a pastor, it was a huge adjustment, and it depended a lot on the senior pastor that was serving there. And what he offered to me was this beautiful affirmation of my position now, that I was a pastor now, and I had that authority now. And he accorded me respect, and that it affected everyone around us, because it would have been really easy for a lot of people to be like, Jessica used to just be the secretary. I don't have to listen to her. Who does she think she is? She's 29. Like, so, right? What could she possibly know? So
it's not relatable or anything. It's fine.
Right. So it was interesting because in some ways it's easier to go places where you're not known and be someone or establish yourself in an identity than to go home and do that. I mean, I think in family systems, we talk about this of anytime you go home, you have this potential trap of falling into doing things just the way they've always been done in your household, whether those were healthy or unhealthy.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, so we have this joke in my family that when my dad is talking on the phone with my uncle, you can always tell because they talk like they're from East Texas. They never talk like they're from East Texas any of the rest of the time. But my dad answers the phone and says, "What you say there, bud?" And you're like, "Oh my God, it's Carl." And my dad's like a businessman, like does not walk around talking like that all the time. But we go and that's fine and help. Like it's hilarious, so it's fine. Like that's not unhealthy.
No,
but
that's the sound of home.
Right? Exactly. And that concept is a really interesting. Family systems, again, I'd recommend it 100 times on this Bible study. But there's a great couple of books, Generation to Generations, the great starting one. Failure of Nerve is another great follow-up to that. If anybody is looking for some light reading to bring some healthy habits to your quarantine and some wild self-awareness, it will ruin and help your life all at once.
But isn't that true about like therapy and introspection in general?
100%. Yes. As a constant goer to therapy, which again, it's fine and not a joke. Yes, I don't always leave therapy feeling awesome. I never leave therapy regretting going.
Right. It's uncovering all this stuff. I mean, yeah.
And it feels like, what does it feel like? What's the verbiage here? It's shedding dead weight, and that can be really painful. And the harder it's stuck, the harder it is to peel it off. But it's dead weight. It's good for you to lose, but it feels so part of your person, and you realize those toxic habits are not, or whatever it is, right?
Yes.
So let me just ask like a quick question. This might be kind of more funny than the others, just because my answer I think is funny. So Ruth assimilates to Israelite culture because she's going to stay with Naomi, and Danielle Kim, as I said earlier, wrote a really great study over the book of Ruth from the perspective of an immigrant, and she talked about assimilation and assimilating to American culture, particularly like using an American name, because Americans don't always pronounce the names of others correctly. And so instead of just having to explain it all the time, they just say an American name, which I think we should work really hard. I try to work hard to call people by their name because I prefer to be called Keri Lynn, not Keri. And so just as another like tip to everybody, when you're meeting somebody from a different country, let's try really hard to say their name, not their American name. But I was thinking about assimilation and what are aspects of culture maybe that you have assimilated to or not that are either positive or negative, like just as like an interesting, so like everyone my age and younger, and I'm like on the tail, like I am barely a millennial by 6 months. And I identify more with millennials than with whatever is after us because I just don't understand people 6 months younger than I am.
Right.
So in my family, I'm the oldest of all the kids, so I'm kind of the only millennial, and I refuse to download TikTok. Like even in the most desperate moments of quarantine where I have felt bored, like I don't understand it. I was not a Vine person. I will tweet, I will Snapchat, I will Instagram, I will Pinterest. I don't understand TikTok. Like I just can't. I don't find that they're funny.
I think they're like really short America's Funniest Home Videos. Like that used to be a thing back when I was a kid. I'm an exile, which I'm that micro generation between Gen X and millennials. Like that. Yeah. That's me.
You've got the best of both worlds.
Oh, right. Mm-hmm. All of the sarcasm and angsty angst of one and all of the misunderstoodness of another. It's awesome.
Perfect storm. It's just like being in middle school all the time.
Basically. And the boomers are like, and you're like, stop.
And I think you're a millennial and you're like, I'm not the worst millennials. Like I am not an avocado toast millennial.
Hey, avocado toast is delicious.
Thank you. And I'm not ruining the economy when I eat it. Go off.
I know. And also millennials are older than you think they are. They are not teenagers anymore. They are grown up.
No, I am the youngest millennial. I am the youngest millennial and I'm 25 and became a Rev 4 days ago. Like
that's awesome.
The millennials are grown. Sorry, everyone.
Right? Stop blaming them for things.
You can't blame us for everything. We're still not buying stuff, but like it's fine. We're not buying diamonds.
Buy stuff.
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
Assimilation.
Yeah. I also do not have the TikTok. I think it's like really short America's Funniest Home Videos. Those used to be VHS. Like it was a thing. It's so funny. I have to define these things to my kid now because the pace of change is just so quick now that like phones that have a dial tone, I had to explain to them because we got a home phone again recently.
Oh my God.
Right. These are things that have to be explained now. Like
dial tone.
You pick it up, it's got to have a dial tone, and then you dial the numbers. Like, what?
You tell them they're lucky they can use the phone while you're using the internet.
Right. That used to be a thing.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my gosh. Okay. I am a late adopter. I do not grab onto new technologies quickly or with any sense of joy. My husband is an early adopter. And so I remember him like getting the first iPhone that we had and being super excited about it. And meanwhile, I'm giving him wicked side eye about it.
Flip phone, you're like, this is literally fine.
This is fine. Let me push number 2, 3 times to get to a different letter for my text message. Everything's fine. Let me count how many text messages I've used this month because that was
you only have 200. Yes, right. I had only 200 texts on my first phone. And I remember people would send like the chain text messages and I was like, you can't send me those because I only have 200 a month.
Right. Oh, man. So I think assimilation, but it's interesting. Okay. So here's what I think is interesting about this question for us is that even if we don't assimilate to certain things, we are still, by virtue of our ethnicity, like part of the dominant culture. And so we don't have to, which is, I mean, a luxury, a privilege that I'm never going to, people don't look at my name and go like, how do you pronounce that? They do ask me how to spell right, which I'm always like, how else have you seen it as a last name? But I mean, sure. W-R-I-G-H-T. Like if you want to spell it R-I-T-E, okay, fine. That might be fun for a day. But I think it's always interesting.
It'd be very high church if your last name was Wright, if you were Reverend Wright.
Reverend Wright? I know, let's do this.
Everywhere you go.
Oh, man. So it's interesting because I'm thinking back to, my family, my mother's family came from Russia and Poland. And they're Jews when they came to the U.S. And my grandpa's, on my mother's side, his family name was Hirschfeld. Like, can you get a more German Jewish sounding name? Hirschfeld.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking about all those stories of folks who change their names. Like legally. They got to Staten Island. The person said, "What's your name?" And they looked around and they're like, "Hirschfield," wondering if that sounded a little more American and would be more acceptable to others. So it's really interesting. Because America, I mean, honestly, the work that I've done in talking about this, it's not a nation that was founded on common language or common beliefs or common ethnicity. None of those things are enshrined in our documents.
Right.
America is built on aspirational values.
Yeah.
Life, liberty, pursuit of, well, property, or, happiness. Scratch out property and put in happiness. That's who we're to be. And yet at the same time, there are these huge pressures of learn English, have Americanized names, acclimate yourself to the dominant culture, because that is how you will be able to get ahead. And that's rough, because I think, we miss some richness. I've heard lots of folks who are first generation Americans, and they're like, my parents refused to speak our native language in the house because they wanted me to speak English. They didn't want that to be a thing that held me back. But I mean, America's one of those few countries, I feel like, where only knowing one language is valued. Like in Europe, people speak 4, 5, 6 languages and it's no big deal.
Canada.
Right.
You've got like towns that only speak French, and that's the deal. That's how it rolls. And the others speak English in both, and it's literally fine.
Right. So I always found it weird that I guess for some people, being English speaking is something they feel like binds us together. But to me, it's like, let's just learn more. Let's learn more stuff. So those are some of my thoughts on assimilation. I think
that's great. Yeah.
Yeah. I did get rid of a minivan. My husband and I had a minivan for like 6 months. And
that's such a mom move.
I couldn't admit it. I didn't want to do it. I was like, this is the best vehicle, and it has doors that go this instead of this. And so my kids are never going to ding someone else's car. And that is awesome. And it is a legit people mover. We can fit everything in here. We could sleep in here. This could be our house for a minute if we needed it to. But I did not want to trade in my cool card. And so we traded in the van. I know that's probably my funny story on assimilation.
I love it. I think that's great. I love it. The progression of watching, from my perspective, watching people become parents right now is really fun, because I'm like, all right, minivan countdown clock. That's always my joke. Like,
we only drive Hondas, so it's like I went from being that cool Civic person to a CRV, which is still pretty spry, and then I went to the Odyssey, the van, and I was like, So now we went back to a Pilot, which is basically a SUV looking minivan.
Nice. Classic. Love it. I think it's great. Oh my God. No sports car. Not until the boys are gone.
My husband bought, the Civic Si. Like our firstborn was in diapers. He was still nursing. And my husband went from, I forget what he had, like maybe a regular Civic or an Accord to a Civic Si. And I was like, are you trying to deny something here? You got a red stick shift, sporty Honda, the sportiest Honda you can get.
You're sitting there holding an infant going, are you kidding me?
It was good times. It's good times.
That's awesome. I love it. Okay, let's do 15 through 18. And this will be a little bit shorter, and then we'll wrap it up. So it says she, which is Naomi again. So she said, see, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law. So this is Naomi talking to Ruth. But Ruth said, do not press me to leave you or to turn back from following you. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die. There I will be buried. May the Lord do thus and so to me, and more as well, if even death parts me from you. When Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more to her. So a couple of things in here. Again, just some notes for us. So one woman's strong commitment to another is radical. I would say even now, like if I have a mentor, and I call her my like bonus mom. She prefers big sister, but I am the same age as her children. So And she was the one that she actually walked with me on Friday at commissioning because we were only allowed 1+1. And what is so wonderfully unique about my relationship with Margaret is kind of this Ruth Naomi situation. And her commitment to me and her commitment to my well-being is something that I've not experienced in a lot of other relationships in my life and even other friendships. Like Margaret lets me call and vent when things are awful. And the reason she walked with me at commissioning is she has sat outside the door of every single interview in the process, from candidacy certification to driving me to Lake Texoma for the BOM interview. And our relationship is so special and so important to me because it is this chosen family that, similar to what you said about home, they have to take you in. Margaret does not. Right. Which makes that commitment so wildly wonderful. And it's the same here with Ruth and Naomi. Ruth is under no obligation to stay with Naomi, which makes this a really beautiful thing to say. And this is, again, where language really gets in the way. So the Hebrew here, there's no verbs when Ruth is giving her speech. So it's not your God will be my God. It's not talking about a future reality. A better translation would be your God, my God, your people, my people. It's present tense. And it sounds a little bit like a robot when you say it that way, but it's this like declaration of what already happened, what already exists for them. In Numbers 30 verse 9, when a person became a widow, whoever she bound herself to was binding. It was typically a son or another husband. And so for this to happen with two women who are both widows is something that, truthfully, it's kind of a miracle this document even made it. Like in such a patriarchal moment and was written the way it's written. And what Ruth shows here is it's called hesed, which is the Hebrew word for loving kindness. And it's this love and loyalty beyond expectation. Again, Margaret is that person for me that is the loving loyalty beyond expectation. And it's, someone who chooses me, right? And I choose her. And so I think too, what Ruth is communicating by staying with Naomi is she's hoping for Naomi's restoration as well. She's not abandoning her, even though now in Hebrew eyes and in Hebrew context, Naomi's kind of worthless, right? And Naomi thinks that God's turned against her, right? Because in Old Testament theology, it's kind of this: if you do good, you get good. If you do bad, you get bad assumption. So Naomi gets bad. Well, what'd you do, girl? But Ruth stays. So my question was a little bit more about comfort zone, but I'm wondering, what do you think about this idea? I'm calling an audible here.
That's fine. That's fine.
What do you think about this loyalty on expectation? Do you have a piece to share on that?
Well, sure. So I think it's interesting because what I was reading when I was, starting my study on Ruth, knowing that we were going to talk about it tonight, is how much the focus is on redemption and redeeming. And there's some words that are translated into English as like next of kin or other words that make us miss all those things. Like the word redeem and redeemer just keeps showing up, redeem and redeemer. And so the character of Ruth here is functioning as like God's hands and feet, right? Because hesed is also the attribute that's given to God when we talk about God's grace and mercy. And so the hesed that Ruth is showing to Naomi is like that embodiment of God's love, that God redeems. God, I think, like, at least in my theology, God doesn't cause bad things to happen, but God absolutely redeems them and works good out of them. I don't think God loosed the coronavirus. I think it just happens. Stuff happens. Things mutate, as we understand, right? But God can wring good even out of the worst circumstances. And so, I think that is, it's interesting because, okay, so I complained about this earlier, but to look back at this with Christian eyes, Naomi, spoiler, she gets redeemed.
Yeah.
But the agent of her redemption is not her, right? So Naomi didn't do anything really to earn her redemption, to claim it, to act, to show her faith. Any of those things that we think you have to do to be redeemed. It was Ruth as God's agent in the story. So in the same way that Christ works our redemption in this story, in this parable, right? If we see it as an extended parable, like you mentioned earlier, Ruth is that agent who says, I'm sticking with you no matter what. And isn't that a beautiful thing? Because if that's how Jesus feels about me, and Jesus feels about you, and Jesus feels about all of us, he clings to us like a spouse.
Yeah.
He wants to be with us even when it feels like the worst thing ever is happening in our lives. And that's awesome. That's really good news. Now
I told y'all when we were studying Mark that none of it was new. This is why I love the Old Testament. You need Jesus. Don't get me wrong. But I've been telling people, I'm like, this is from the Old Testament. That's been my soapbox. And so you just proved my point. Y'all, you need Jesus, but look at Ruth.
Right? She's functioning as the Christ character in this story. This one who demonstrates loving kindness. Even when Naomi's at her worst, because she's, and
even when culture presents a totally opposite, when culture presents that abandonment would be appropriate.
Right. That you should look out for number one, right? Young lady, you need to be looking out for yourself. You could still have sons and have your retirement plan in place. You just need to go get married to somebody else.
Remarry.
And preferably someone within your own culture. Do not be pulling any more nice Jewish boys over here.
You're clinging to a Moabite woman. Yes. Fascinating.
Stick with your own kind. Ooh. Don't like that.
So I'm going to do the last part because this is the part I really wanted to get to. Hit me. So I've named each of these sections. I forgot to mention. So verse 1 through 5 was turning away. 6 through 4 was turning back. Verse 15 through 18 was don't tell me how to turn my back to you. And then 19 through 22 is turning bitter. And as your friendly neighborhood cynic, this section spoke to my sweet little heart because people are always telling me that I'm too young to be as cynical as I am, but I've just been this way. It just is who I am. So I really related with Naomi in these sections. So let's read verses 19 through 22. So the two of them went on till they came to Bethlehem. So they're back to the house of bread, that there's bread in the house of bread because there's no more famine. When they came to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the women said, is this Naomi? She said to them, call me no longer Naomi. Call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt bitterly with me. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has dealt harshly with me and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me? So Naomi returned together with Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, who came back with her from the country of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. So a couple of language things. So Naomi means sweet, right, is what we covered earlier. And Mara means bitter.
Mm-hmm.
So Naomi, and so the whole town is stirred by them coming in, which I have to wonder. And in my worst moments this week, we always joke about the bags under your eyes or whatever, and I put concealer on before this so you can't see it. But you can see in some of the videos of the last couple of weeks, I had some raccoon eyes happening. But things happen to our appearance when we're experiencing extreme grief and extreme pain, right? Mm-hmm. I have to wonder what in the heck did Naomi look like?
Not good is my guess.
Yeah.
I bet people were lining up to tell her, you look tired. Because isn't that what they say to us?
What is it oh my gosh, I've never been pregnant, but there's the whole myth of you're glowing. Have you ever actually hung around a pregnant woman? Because they're I want to kill everyone.
Yeah, I did not feel like I was glowing. I mean, sometimes I felt better than others, but
it was
not
hard.
glowing. Maybe slightly perspiring at all times was more like it.
Yeah, cracks me up. But so the whole town is stirring, but only the women speak to Naomi, which again, we've had these kind of cool feminist moments that have happening, but I think the author wants to remind you we're in a patriarchal society here still.
It would not have been appropriate for men to be talking to her.
No. Only women tell other women they're having a bad hair day. Am I right?
So rude.
Well, women are mean to women sometimes, right? Like when it comes to our appearance, like I get more comments from women than I do from men that are negative. About
because we're programmed.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you think it's because we're programmed to be a little cutthroat? Like I remember listening to clergy women who were like when they would talk about the first women who were ordained, and sometimes they were apparently kind of nasty to each other, but it was because there could only be one in certain positions. Like you wanted to be the one who got to sit at that committee table. You could be the one who was on the cabinet. You could be the one because could be only one. They wanted it as a token. They didn't really want a woman. And so if you have to try to claw your way to that one position that's available, you end up tearing your sisters down.
Well, and I was talking to David the other day and we were joking around about I told him like, I don't know why there's 15 different shows about the like mean bully when the biggest problems I had in high school were Mean Girls. Like the movie Mean Girls like barely hits like actually how Mean Girls work. Right. So there is this reminder of this patriarchal moment of this, again, we have these great kind of egalitarian things that happen in this like fierce, awesome female friendship moment. And then it's like, well, Naomi looked bad and only the women came to talk to her about it.
Mm-hmm.
But
isn't it so funny too? Like, isn't it? Okay. Did you catch this one where Naomi says in verse 21, I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. The whole reason they left the house of bread was because it was empty there.
Bread. Yes. And also your husbands weren't married when you left. Like what's happening here? It's so interesting, right? And again, in verse 22, I think it's so interesting that the author just like you went to Perkins, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Did you have Dr. Heller for
Old Testament? Yes.
So the way that Dr. Heller tells everyone to write a paragraph is your opening sentence should tell you what the paragraph's going to be about. Your paragraph is what your paragraph is about, and then your last sentence better tie up the paragraph with a bow or I'm taking a point off. Is what he would say. And he was a Yale man and he wore a bow tie every week, so he would kind of say like, you tie it like a bow, and he would like straighten his bow tie or whatever. And I adore him, man. And I just thought, oh my God, did Roy Heller write the book of Ruth? I read verse 22. But it's a dig, right? Naomi returned together with Ruth the Moabite. We're aware she's a Moabite author.
In case you didn't hear us, though, she was from the country of Moab. Right. Like it repeats right there. Like you called her a Moabite. I get it. She's from Moab.
We got it. We are none of this has gone well. Like we got it. So I was really and Naomi. And to your point earlier, Naomi says, I came back empty. Girl, Ruth came with you. Like this like incredible moment that shouldn't happen. It's like
I just imagine Ruth being like, I'm standing right here.
Yes,
like did I just become invisible? What happened? Oh wait, I'm a Moabite. Apparently I am invisible.
Bad. Whoops. Yeah, but so here's the thing. Naomi is just bitter.
Yeah.
And bitter to the point where she can't even, like we said earlier, see the one good thing.
Mm-hmm.
And bitter. And again, I have experienced grief again on a very personal level this year. And people keep talking about stages of grief and all these things that I think are just like bogus. Here's what grief really is. Grief is a cloud that covers reality. Mm-hmm. And the hardest part about grief is not getting rid of the cloud, but remembering what's true, even when the cloud's not there, right? It's like, there was like a metaphor, like pilots, when they fly their airplanes, they're supposed to trust their instruments, not what they can see out the window, right? So grief, you have to trust your instruments. Mm-hmm. And so Naomi's not trusting her instrument. She's not seeing the good thing that's with her, that's staying with her, that loves her, that is clinging to her as a spouse. And she's complaining to her friends who've told her she's having a bad hair day, that she's got nothing.
Right.
And here's what and you hit this a little bit earlier, so you already made my point, which is awesome. Pockets of our life cannot be filled by our own efforts.
Mm-hmm.
It really does require community. It requires asking for help. If necessary, it requires going to therapy. If even more necessary, it requires going to psychiatrists. And if that's the route you need to go, then that's what it is. But Naomi is bitter. Naomi is not able to see what is true because of the cloud of grief. And yet we're going to see in the next couple weeks that God is still going to use Naomi. And as a cynic who has spent a lot of this year really, really, really blinded by the cloud of grief, that's such a message of hope for me, because even in my frustrations and my moments where I am like, this is not fair or whatever, like, I know that I'm not beyond redemption within that. And my redemption didn't happen just in one moment at church camp when I was 12 or whatever. It happens on a continual basis. It's the sanctification that we talk about in the Methodist Church all the time. That Naomi's being sanctified in this story, I think, is what we're seeing, right? And she forgets that she is loved and has somebody with her, and Ruth doesn't leave her because she overhears that conversation.
I'd be tempted to, like,
right.
I walked all the way from Moab for this.
Right. Be like, man, Orpah's choice doesn't look so bad now, does it?
Right. These women are not nice here in Bethlehem.
Yeah. Yeah. So any other thoughts on that? The only question I kind of had was, if you had a story from life or from ministry where God has used bitterness or grief for good. Yeah.
Oh man. Okay. Okay. Well, okay. Bitterness or grief. Okay. Well, here, I'm going to tell this story. It's probably grief adjacent.
That's okay.
So there's a gentleman in a church that I served. And one of the things I had organized for our church to do was to work in a mission to feed folks alongside some Muslim folks. Okay. So we get out there and we're making meals and we're doing the stuff, we're doing the ministry, and he comes over to me, and what he says to me is, well, damn it, Jessica, God's done it again. And I was like, pardon? And so he went on to tell a story of how there were certain groups of people that he really didn't understand or like. And he identified 2 or 3. And he said, but what God keeps doing to me is bringing me into relationship with those folks. He talked about a business venture that he was in where he happened to be working side by side with this person of a group that he thought he hated, that he had some bitterness toward. And he said, but the guy was good. And I learned about him. And, it's that thing where, hate can't withstand proximity. You get close to folks, you learn stories, you see them for human, and then that hate just can't survive. And so what he was saying to me in that moment of, this feeding ministry was, I've held on to this thing probably since 9/11, maybe even before, right? This assumption, this bitterness, this grief. And I've pinned that onto all Muslim people. And what I learned today in coming into proximity with Muslim folks in our community, they're good folks and they love their neighbors and they want to serve their neighbors. And he's saying, I'm actually kind of mad at God for teaching me this lesson. It was a lot easier to be bitter, right? Yeah. It was a lot easier to be bitter.
It's so easy.
Than to actually get to know people.
Easy. Yeah, exactly.
And because I think bitterness or grief, like bitterness can become like a shield, right?
Yeah,
and we feel like it shields us from hurt and pain, but what it actually shields us from.
Because I'm bitter about it, it doesn't actually hurt me. But
right. But then love can't get in either, right? Like if I've put up a wall, like pain may not be able to get in, except the pain I'm still holding on this side of the wall.
But neither can the good stuff.
The good stuff can't get in. So that's probably the story that I would come up with for that one is
so good.
I treasure that. Like there's not many times when people have walked up to me and said, damn it, that I treasure, but that's one.
That's awesome. Oh my word. That's so great.
My grandpa used to, I used to think when I was a kid, I used to think my name was Jesus Christ Jessica, because that's what my Jewish grandpa called me. Just in fits of exasperation.
Yeah. Yep, that's awesome.
So I
Oh,
think it
man.
brought back those memories too.
Yeah, no, it's good. That's so great. Well, thank you for sharing that story. And we have hit 8:30, so I want to honor our time. And
This is so
we
much
did it.
fun.
I know that we were worried in the first 5 verses, but you all doubt me. And every time listen, you'll think this is hilarious. I had David Lesnar and Edlin Cowley, and I had like Mark 13, which is like 75 verses or something just insane. And I started just taking charge. I was like, all right, we're done, moving on. And we did it. It was awesome.
Take
So
that
that may go
authority.
down. I know that may go on my like in my discipleship. That may be my discipleship project for residency. Oh man, it was awesome.
How to keep senior pastors on track.
Bless them. Associates know how to keep it snappy. No, Jessica, thank you so much for joining us. My dog, get this, is being a bad dog. She's never been allowed on the couch since she lived here a week ago. And guess who's on the couch right now? Because she thinks it's Bible study and there's no rules.
You need a squirt thing. That's how I discipline my cat from a distance. I get like a squirt bottle and I go, and she hates it.
Rosie, come here. You say hi to people? No, you're on the couch.
No, this couch is nice.
Yeah, I bet. I even have like the coffee table like pushed up to the couch so she couldn't. I don't even know how she got up there. I was so focused on Ruth. She knew it too. She's like, you ain't watching. I'll make bad choices. This is Keri Lynn becoming a dog mom, everyone. You get to watch the slow progression. Jessica, thank you for being our guest.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
Still coming, sans David, even though like he's the one that invited you. But when he was like, is it okay if I miss? I'm like, well, Jessica, yeah, it's perfectly fine.
We will not have a lack of things to talk about. It will be awesome.
Not at all. So everyone watching, thank you so much for joining us again and for your comments about minivans and the things that make you happy and TikToks. We super appreciate you all engaging with us. This week, just a couple announcement pieces. We have our regular 8:30 and 11 worship services, both in person and online. If you want to go RSVP, we've got plenty of space and plenty of room. So if you've been not coming in person because you don't want to take someone else's spot, none of the spots are being taken. So come take your spot. It's totally fine. And for those of you who prefer a outdoor or not ready to come inside service, we are offering our first outdoor worship this Sunday at 4:30. It should fall perfectly in the halftime of the Cowboys game, so we can pray that they have a better second half than the first half like they did this past week. This is how you have to do ministry in Dallas, Texas.
Texas priorities.
Heck yeah. And if anybody wants to make some crockpot queso and bring me some, since I won't be attending my own watch party for the first half because I'll be getting ready for this wonderful worship service we're going to have outside, that's fine too. And for everybody watching the 4:30 service, we're going to be preaching from the lectionary, which is this really cool way to go through the Bible in 3 years if you follow it, the whole Bible. So the sermon will be different on Sunday night as it is different than the one on Sunday morning. So if you feel like double dipping as well and coming in the morning to pray for the Cowboys and coming at halftime to pray for the Cowboys, it's going to be a really great service. Bring your own chair. We'll overlook the pond at Creekwood, and we'll be posting about that the rest of this week. So thank you all again for joining us. Jessica, thank you so much. And we will see you all Sunday or next week.